Daniel had never believed much in destiny, but when he met Lena, something about her made him wonder if fate was real after all. It happened on an ordinary afternoon when he stopped at a small cafe near his office. He wasn't in a hurry that day, which was unusual for him. He just wanted a quiet moment away from work. The place was calm, filled with the smell of roasted coffee and soft music playing in the background. He sat by the window, watching people pass by, when a gentle voice interrupted his thoughts. "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" He looked up and saw her. She wasn't trying to look perfect. She had that natural kind of beauty that came from confidence and kindness. He smiled and shook his head. She thanked him, sat down, and began scrolling through her phone. For a few minutes they didn't speak, but then a small accident broke the silence. Her coffee cup tipped slightly, spilling across the table. Without thinking, Daniel handed her some tissues and said, "Don't worry, happens to all of us." She laughed softly, a little embarrassed, and that's when their first real conversation began. It started with small talk, but soon it turned into something deeper. She told him she worked in design, loved sketching, and spent her weekends taking long walks by the lake. Daniel found himself talking more than usual, too, about his dreams, his childhood, and how he always felt something was missing, though he could never explain what. They ended up talking for almost 2 hours, completely forgetting about time. When it was finally time to leave, Lena smiled and said, "I'm glad we met today. It was unexpected but nice." Daniel nodded, feeling the same way. As she walked out, he couldn't help but feel that something in his day had shifted. Over the next few weeks, they kept running into each other, first by chance, then by choice. It became their quiet routine. Sometimes at the same cafe, other times at the park nearby. Each time their conversations grew longer, filled with laughter, stories, and those little silences that felt comfortable rather than awkward. Daniel began noticing things about her. How she tilted her head when she laughed, how she always looked at people when they spoke, and how she never rushed through life. She lived with a calmness that drew him in. She wasn't like anyone he had met before. One evening, as they sat near the lake watching the reflection of the city lights in the water, Daniel asked her, "Do you believe in soulmates?" Lena smiled faintly and said, "I believe some people meet at the right time, and that makes it feel like destiny." He thought about that answer long after she said it. Days turned into weeks, and their bond deepened. Daniel's friends started noticing the change in him. He smiled more often, seemed lighter. When they asked who was responsible for it, he just said, "Someone special." He didn't want to share too much yet. Something about his connection with Lena felt fragile and private, like it belonged only to them. One Sunday morning, Daniel invited Lena to meet his family. He was nervous about it, though he didn't show it. His mother welcomed her warmly, offering tea and homemade snacks. His father, who was usually quiet, actually joined in on their conversation. By the end of the day, everyone seemed to like her. His mother even said later, "She has a kind heart. You can tell just by the way she listens." Hearing that made Daniel's heart swell. He knew his family's approval meant a lot, but what mattered most was how he felt when she was around. Everything seemed easier when Lena was near. The world felt softer, and he felt seen in a way he never had before. They started spending more time together, walking through street markets, cooking dinner at his place, watching old movies. Each day added another layer to their connection. They shared small moments that didn't seem grand but meant everything. Late-night talks, shared jokes, quiet hugs. Sometimes when she was telling him a story, Daniel would just watch her speak. There was something peaceful about her presence. He found himself thinking, maybe this is what real love feels like, simple, steady and honest. One rainy evening, as they sat on his couch, Lena leaned her head on his shoulder and said softly, "I'm glad we met." He smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Me too, I don't think it was an accident," he said. She looked up at him, eyes glimmering, and whispered, "Maybe it wasn't." That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He kept replaying their moments in his head, the laughter, the comfort, the way her hand fit so perfectly in his. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't thinking about the future with fear. He was imagining it with hope. The following month, they planned a short trip to a small coastal town. It was Lena's idea, and Daniel immediately agreed. The trip turned out to be magical. They explored local markets, tried new food, and took long evening walks by the shore. One night, while watching the waves crash under the moonlight, Lena said, "Do you ever think about forever?" Daniel smiled and replied, "I do now." She looked at him, her eyes reflecting both warmth and a trace of sadness, but he didn't notice it then. He was lost in the moment, in the sound of the waves and the feeling of her hand in his. When they returned home, Daniel felt like his world had changed for the better. Everything felt right. Even the ordinary days seemed brighter when she was around. He couldn't imagine his life without her. A few days later, Lena surprised him at work with his favorite coffee and a handwritten note that said, "You make my days lighter." It was such a small gesture, but it meant the world to him. He couldn't stop smiling that entire day. At night, he called her and said, "You know, I never thought love could feel this easy." She laughed softly and replied, "Maybe that's how you know it's real." As weeks went by, Daniel became certain that Lena was the one. He started saving up to buy a small ring, not to propose just yet, but because he wanted to be ready when the moment felt right. He even practiced what he'd say when the time came. Sometimes, when she wasn't around, he'd catch himself smiling for no reason, remembering her voice, her little habits, the way she always made him feel like he mattered. To him, their love was perfect, quiet, steady, and full of warmth. He believed nothing could shake it. He believed in her completely. But what Daniel didn't know was that Lena carried something deep inside, a secret she hadn't found the courage to share. A part of her past that still shadowed her heart. For now, though, everything between them felt right. They laughed, they dreamed, they built moments that felt like they would last forever. And Daniel, unaware of what lay ahead, believed with all his heart that he had finally found the kind of love people spend their whole lives searching for. Days turned into months, and Daniel's life began to feel like a story he had once only dreamed of. Everything about Lena made him feel alive. They had built a rhythm together: morning calls, surprise lunches, evening walks, and long talks before bed. Even the simplest things like grocery shopping or cooking dinner felt special when they were together. People around them often said they were the kind of couple that made others believe in love again. Daniel liked hearing that, not because it made him proud, but because it reminded him how lucky he was. He'd often look at Lena and think, if happiness had a face, it would look like this. They had their favorite spots: the cafe where they first met, the quiet park bench near the lake, and the small bakery that made her favorite pastries. Those places became their little world. Whenever Daniel felt tired or stressed, spending time with her was like pressing reset on everything. She had that effect on him. But even in the middle of all that happiness, small things began to feel slightly different. Sometimes Lena would drift off while they talked, as if her mind was far away. When Daniel asked what she was thinking about, she'd smile and say, "Nothing important." He believed her. Everyone had moments of silence, he thought. But there was something in her eyes that didn't match her words. One evening, they were having dinner at his apartment. It was raining outside, and they sat by the window, listening to the sound of raindrops. Lena seemed quiet that night. Daniel asked, "You okay?" She nodded and said softly, "Yeah, just a little tired." He didn't press further. Instead, he reached out and took her hand. "You know you can tell me anything, right?" He said. She smiled faintly. "I know," she whispered. They spent the rest of the evening watching a movie, but Daniel couldn't stop thinking about her silence. Something about it felt heavy, though he couldn't explain why. A few days later, they went on a small weekend trip to a nearby town. Lena loved old architecture, so they spent the day exploring old buildings and taking photos. She seemed happy again, laughing, teasing him, and holding his hand as they walked. Daniel felt the uneasiness fade away. Maybe he had just imagined it. Maybe she really was fine. That night, as they sat by the balcony overlooking the streetlights, Daniel turned to her and said, "You make everything better." She leaned on his shoulder, replying softly, "You make me want to believe in love again." Her words touched him deeply. He didn't know she needed to believe in love again, but he felt honored to be the reason. He wrapped his arm around her and said, "Then I'll make sure you never forget how it feels." She looked at him, smiled, and kissed him lightly. For that moment, everything felt right again. When they returned home, life continued its beautiful rhythm. They made plans, shared dreams, and even talked about moving to a bigger place together one day. Daniel began to imagine what their future might look like. A small home, maybe a dog, and quiet. Mornings together. He wanted that kind of life with her. But soon, the small signs began to return. Sometimes Lena would get phone calls and step outside to answer them. When she came back, her mood would shift slightly. If Daniel asked who it was, she would simply say, "Just a friend from work." He trusted her. But something about her tone left him uneasy. She also started avoiding certain questions, like when he asked about her family or her past. She always found a gentle way to change the subject. It wasn't that she refused to talk, but she never gave clear answers either. Daniel didn't want to push her. He knew people had their reasons for staying quiet about some things. Still, a small part of him began to wonder what she wasn't telling him. One evening, they were out for dinner with friends. Everyone was joking and sharing stories about their relationships. Someone asked Lena how she and Daniel met, and she told the story with that same charm that had captured him in the first place. Everyone laughed, clapped, and said they were perfect for each other. But then one of the friends asked, "So where were you before you moved here?" Lena froze for a split second. Daniel noticed, though no one else seemed to. She quickly smiled and said, "Oh, I lived in another city for work." Her answer sounded rehearsed, but he let it go. That night, on their way home, he brought it up gently. "You seemed uncomfortable when they asked about your old city," he said. She smiled weakly and said, "I just don't like talking about that time. It wasn't a happy part of my life." He nodded, not wanting to push further, but deep down, something about that answer stayed with him. He wondered what could have hurt her so much that she still couldn't talk about it. Weeks passed, and despite the occasional distance, their love remained strong. They celebrated Lena's birthday with a small surprise party Daniel organized. When she walked in and saw the decorations, her eyes filled with tears. She hugged him tightly and whispered, "No one's ever done something like this for me." Daniel smiled and said, "Get used to it. You deserve it." The evening was full of laughter, music, and warmth. Later that night, as they sat together, Lena looked at him and said softly, "You make me feel safe." He didn't know why, but those words made him emotional. He held her close and whispered, "That's all I ever want." Yet even then, he couldn't shake the small feeling that there was something she wasn't saying. It wasn't about trust, it was about a strange sadness that sometimes flickered behind her smile. One weekend, they decided to visit the lake where they first talked for hours months ago. They sat quietly, watching the water shimmer in the sunlight. Lena leaned against him and said, "Do you ever think some things are too good to last?" Daniel frowned slightly. "Why would you say that?" She shrugged. "I don't know. Sometimes when life feels too perfect, it scares me. Like it's only a matter of time before something changes." He looked at her and said softly, "Then we'll make sure it doesn't. We'll keep it real, one day at a time." She smiled, but it was a sad kind of smile. "I hope so," she whispered. After that day, Daniel became more attentive. He wanted to make sure she always felt secure. He'd send her little messages during the day, telling her he was thinking about her. She always replied with warmth, but her replies sometimes came hours later, and her tone, though loving, carried a quietness he couldn't ignore. One night, while they were having dinner, Daniel noticed her phone buzzing repeatedly. She quickly silenced it and turned it upside down. He didn't say anything at first, but curiosity got the better of him. "Everything okay?" he asked. She nodded quickly. "Just work stuff. Nothing important." He smiled and let it go, but something about the tension in her voice made him uneasy. Later that night, as she slept beside him, Daniel lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He wasn't angry or suspicious, just confused. He trusted her deeply, but he could feel there was a distance forming, even if she didn't mean for it to happen. He thought about how love could be both beautiful and fragile, how even the strongest connections could be shaken by secrets. But he convinced himself it was just a phase, that every couple went through times like this. As he watched her sleeping peacefully beside him, he promised himself that no matter what, he would protect what they had. He believed their love was strong enough to face anything. What he didn't know was that Lena's silence wasn't about fear of losing love. It was about the past she hadn't escaped yet. And sooner or later, That past was going to find its way back into their perfect world. The following weeks brought small but noticeable changes. Daniel began to feel that something had shifted between them, though he couldn't point to one single reason. It wasn't a fight or a misunderstanding. It was just this quiet space that had started to grow between them. Lena still smiled, still said she loved him, still showed up when she could. But her laughter felt different now, almost like it came from somewhere far away. Daniel tried to ignore it at first, convincing himself that everyone had phases when they were quieter, more thoughtful. But his heart knew that something wasn't quite right. One evening after work, he decided to surprise her. He bought her favorite takeout meal and some flowers and drove to her apartment. He had done it many times before, but this time she wasn't expecting him. When he knocked, it took a while before she opened the door. She looked startled, almost uneasy, though she quickly covered it with a smile. "Daniel, you're here," she said, trying to sound cheerful. He smiled, holding up the bag of food. "I thought we could have dinner together. I missed you." Her smile softened. "That's sweet. Come in." The apartment felt unusually quiet. There was a half-packed suitcase by the couch, which caught his attention. Before he could ask, she said quickly, "It's for work. I have a short trip tomorrow." He nodded slowly. "You didn't tell me about a trip." "It came up suddenly," she said, avoiding his eyes. "Just 2 days. I'll call you, I promise." He wanted to believe her, and he did, mostly. They ate dinner together, and for a while things felt normal again. She laughed, asked about his day, and teased him like before, but there was still something in her eyes that he couldn't read. Later that night, while cleaning up, Daniel noticed her phone light up with a message. He didn't mean to look, but the screen flashed briefly before it went dark. He saw only a name he didn't recognize. His chest tightened a little, but he quickly looked away. He didn't want to invade her privacy. Trust, he told himself, was the foundation of everything they had. Before leaving, he hugged her and whispered, "I'll miss you." She smiled, hugged him back, and said softly, "You have no idea how much that means to me." The next day, she texted him early in the morning, "Landed safely. Talk soon." Her message made him smile. He spent the day thinking about her, waiting for her call that night, but it never came. He told himself maybe she was busy or tired from travel. The next day passed the same way. No call, only a short message. "Long day. I'll talk to you tomorrow." He didn't want to seem clingy, so he didn't press her. Still, he couldn't ignore the growing unease in his heart. When she returned 2 days later, she seemed distant, distracted. He asked about her trip, and she smiled faintly. "It went fine," she said. "Just meetings and stress. Nothing exciting." He could sense she didn't want to talk about it, so he let it go. But from that point, her silence began to stretch even longer. One night, Daniel's friend noticed his mood and asked what was wrong. Daniel shrugged and said, "I think Lena's pulling away, but I don't know why." His friend said, "Maybe she's going through something personal." "Give her time," Daniel nodded. He wanted to trust that. He wanted to believe that everything would return to normal if he just stayed patient. So, he started doing small things to bring her closer again, sending her morning texts, dropping by with coffee, planning simple weekend outings. Sometimes she seemed touched, but other times she appeared lost in her own thoughts. One Saturday afternoon, they went to a nearby fair. The place was full of music, laughter, and bright lights. Daniel tried to keep things light, joking and buying her favorite snacks. For a while it worked. She smiled, took pictures, and held his hand. As they sat together on a bench later, he said, "See, you're smiling again. That's my favorite thing about you." She looked at him for a long moment before saying quietly, "You always know how to make me feel safe." That word, safe, kept echoing in his mind. It was beautiful but also heavy. It made him wonder what she needed protection from. A few days later, Daniel decided to ask her directly what was going on. They were sitting at his place eating dinner quietly. The silence between them was louder than the ticking clock on the wall. "Lena," he said softly, "are you sure you're okay? You've seemed far away lately." She looked up, startled. "Far away?" "Yesha," he said. "You're here, but sometimes it feels like you're somewhere else in your mind. I don't mean to push, but you can tell me if something's wrong." For a moment she said nothing. Then she took a deep breath and said, "It's not you, Daniel, it's me. I've just been dealing with some things I don't know how to explain yet." He reached across the table and took her hand. "You don't have to go through anything alone," he said. "Whatever it is, I'll understand." She looked at him with eyes full of emotion. "You say that now," she whispered, "but some things, once you know them, they change everything." He shook his head gently. "Not for me. Not with you." She smiled sadly and squeezed his hand but said nothing more. That night when she left, Daniel sat alone for a long time, thinking about her words. They made him uneasy, but he also felt a strange tenderness toward her. Whatever secret she was carrying, he was ready to face it with her. Over the next few days, he noticed her becoming quieter. She started canceling plans, saying she needed time to herself. Daniel tried to respect that, but it was hard. The silence between them grew into something heavier. One evening, while scrolling through social media, he noticed something that made his heart skip. In one of Lena's older posts, someone had left a comment months ago that said, "Hope you're doing better now." The tone of it didn't seem casual, it felt personal. Daniel clicked on the profile, but it was private. He stopped himself before going further. He didn't want to become the kind of person who searched for answers behind someone's back. The next day, he called her and said, "Let's meet tonight." "No plans, just you and me." They met at their usual cafe. The place was almost empty. Lena smiled when she saw him, but it was a tired smile. They ordered coffee and sat quietly. After a while, Daniel said, "You know, this place reminds me of when we first met. Everything felt easy then." She looked down and said softly, "I remember. It was a good day." He hesitated, then asked, "What happened, Lena? You don't have to hide from me. Whatever it is, I can handle it." She looked at him with tears forming in her eyes, but she blinked them away quickly. "I just need more time," she whispered. Daniel nodded slowly, though his heart ached. "I'll wait," he said. She smiled faintly and said, "You're too kind to me." That night, as they walked to their cars, she suddenly hugged him tightly. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not giving up on me." He held her close, feeling the tremor in her body. "Always," he said quietly. As he drove home, his mind was full of questions. He wanted to believe everything would work out. But something deep inside him knew that the story wasn't as simple as he wanted it to be. He didn't know what her secret was, or why it was haunting her so deeply, but he could feel it. Something was coming. Something that would change everything he thought he knew about her, and about their perfect love. The following days felt strangely quiet for Daniel. He kept checking his phone, hoping for a message from Lena that never came. She had said she needed time, and though he wanted to respect that, it was getting harder each day. The silence between them began to feel like a wall that was growing taller with every passing moment. He kept replaying their last conversation in his head, her eyes filled with emotion, her trembling voice when she said, "I just need more time." What did that mean? Time for what? He couldn't stop wondering. A week passed before she called him again. When he saw her name appear on his screen, his heart jumped. He answered immediately, trying to sound calm. "Hey," he said, her voice was soft. "Hi, can we meet tonight?" "Of course," he replied without hesitation. They met at the small park near her apartment, the one where they often sat under the big oak tree. The evening air was cool and the park was nearly empty. Lena looked tired but calm, as if she had been thinking deeply about something for days. Daniel smiled when he saw her, but she didn't smile back in the same way. She seemed distant, but her eyes were gentle. They sat quietly for a while before she spoke. "I've been thinking a lot," she said slowly. "About us." "About everything," Daniel nodded. "I have too," he said. "I just want you to know that whatever's bothering you, you don't have to face it alone." She looked at him for a long moment. "That's the thing," she said softly. "It's not that simple." There was a pause. Daniel could feel the tension in the air, but he didn't push her. Instead, he said, "Then start wherever you can. I'll listen." Lena took a deep breath and looked down at her hands. "Daniel, you're the kindest person I've ever known. You've given me something I didn't think I deserved, peace. But there are things about my life that you don't know." His heart began to beat faster. "Okay," he said carefully. "Then tell me. I want to understand." But just then she shook her head and said, "Not tonight. I thought I was ready, but I'm not." Daniel tried to hide his disappointment, but it was clear on his face. She reached for his hand and said quietly, "Please be patient with me." He nodded, though a part of him was breaking inside. "I will," he said softly. They sat there for a long time in silence, just holding hands. The sky grew darker and a few lights flickered on around the park. When she finally stood up to leave, she looked at him with eyes that seemed to hold both love and sorrow. "You've been so good to me," she whispered. "I don't ever want to hurt you." Those words lingered in his mind for days after. Over the next week, Lena's behavior grew even more unpredictable. Sometimes she'd call and sound cheerful, laughing like before. Other times she'd disappear completely for a day or two, replying to messages hours later with vague answers. Daniel tried to stay calm, but the worry was eating at him. He wasn't angry, just scared. Scared of losing her. Scared that whatever she was hiding might take her away from him. One night, after not hearing from her for 2 full days, he decided to drive to her apartment. He didn't plan to confront her, just to make sure she was okay. When he arrived, the lights inside were off. He knocked gently, then again, but there was no answer. He waited a few minutes, then left. Later that night, she finally called. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I didn't mean to worry you." He sighed in relief. "Where were you?" "I came by, but you weren't home." "I just needed some time alone," she said. "Everything's fine, I promise." He didn't believe everything was fine, but he didn't argue. "Okay," he said quietly. "Just, please don't shut me out completely." "I won't," she whispered. The next weekend, Lena suggested they go for a drive. Daniel agreed immediately. It was a sunny afternoon, and for the first time in a while, she seemed relaxed. They drove out of the city to a quiet countryside road lined with trees. The air smelled of fresh grass and rain. As they drove, she played music softly, humming along to old songs. Daniel couldn't help smiling. "You seem happier today," he said. She looked out the window and said, "I'm trying to be." They stopped by a small lake and sat on a wooden bench, watching the water ripple in the wind. For a while, it felt like old times again. They talked about random things, their favorite memories, places they wanted to visit, food they wanted to try. But then her tone changed. She grew quiet and said, "Do you ever feel like you're living someone else's life?" Daniel frowned. "What do you mean?" She sighed. "Like you're happy, but deep down you know it's built on something that isn't real. Something you haven't faced yet." He shook his head. "No, I've had regrets, sure, but I don't think that kind of happiness is fake. I think it's real if you feel it." She looked at him, eyes glistening. "Even if it's built on a lie?" He hesitated. "A lie can't make real love, Lena. If something's hidden, it'll always come out eventually." She nodded slowly, as if those words hit her harder than he realized. "You're right," she whispered. "That's what scares me." Daniel wanted to reach out and comfort her, but before he could, she stood up. "Let's go," she said softly. The drive back was quiet. She didn't say much, and he didn't press her. He could sense she was fighting an internal battle, one he didn't understand but desperately wanted to. That night, as he dropped her home, she leaned in and hugged him tightly. "Thank you for not giving up on me," she whispered. He looked at her and said, "I'm not going anywhere." She smiled faintly. "I know," she said. "That's what makes this so hard." The next few days passed slowly. Daniel tried to focus on work, but his mind kept drifting back to her words. What did she mean by so hard? Why did she keep hinting at something but never say it? One evening she called and asked him to meet her at their favorite cafe the next day. Her voice was calm but heavy. He asked if everything was okay, and she simply said, "It's time you knew everything." He barely slept that night. His mind was full of questions, fears, and memories of their happiest days. He couldn't shake the feeling that whatever she was about to tell him would change everything. The next day, he arrived early. He sat by the window, just like the first time they met. When Lena walked in, she looked different, composed but with sadness in her eyes. She sat down quietly, her hands folded in front of her. Daniel smiled weakly. "Hey," he said. "You sounded serious on the phone." She nodded. "I am." He leaned forward, his heart pounding. "Then tell me. Whatever it is, I can take it." Lena looked down for a long moment before whispering, "You've been nothing but good to me. You deserve honesty." Daniel swallowed hard. "Then be honest." She lifted her eyes to meet his, and he saw something he hadn't seen before. Deep guilt mixed with fear. "Daniel," she said softly, "there's something I've never told you, and I can't keep it hidden anymore." He felt his chest tighten, but he stayed still, waiting for her to continue. Her voice trembled slightly. I didn't lie about loving you. That part is real. But there's something about my past that you don't know. Something I've been too scared to share. Daniel's heart pounded as silence filled the space between them. She took a shaky breath. After I tell you, you might not see me the same way again, he whispered. Lena, nothing could change how I feel about you. She gave him a sad smile. You might say that now, she said. But once you hear the truth, you'll understand why I've been so afraid. Then she looked away, her voice breaking slightly. Can we go somewhere quiet? I can't say it here. Daniel nodded slowly, trying to hide the nervousness rising inside him. Of course, he said. As they walked out together, neither of them spoke. The city lights flickered around them, and Daniel's mind raced. He didn't know what was coming, but he knew one thing for sure. This was the moment that would decide the future of everything they had built together. They drove in silence for a long time, the only sound coming from the soft hum of the car engine and the faint music playing on the radio. Daniel didn't know where they were going, and Lena didn't say. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, and her eyes stayed fixed on the road ahead. Finally, after nearly half an hour, she turned onto a quiet road that led to a small viewpoint overlooking the city. The place was peaceful, with a gentle wind blowing and lights flickering below them. She parked the car and sat there for a while, staring out the window. Daniel waited, not wanting to pressure her. He could tell she was fighting hard to find the right words. After a long pause, she whispered, There's something you don't know about how I ended up here. About my past. He turned to her, his voice calm. You can tell me anything. She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. Before I met you, I wasn't in a good place. I made mistakes, big ones. I was trying to survive, and I hurt people who didn't deserve it. I thought if I left everything behind, maybe I could start over. Daniel felt a chill run through him. What kind of mistakes? He asked softly. Lena took a deep breath. I used to be with someone who wasn't good for me. He controlled everything I did. I thought it was love, but it wasn't. When I finally left, things got complicated. He wouldn't let me go easily. I had to run away and change everything about my life. Daniel's heart broke as he listened. The way she spoke, the fear, the pain. It was clear this wasn't something she made up. I thought if I started over, I could be free, she said, her voice trembling. But I never really felt safe. That's why sometimes I disappear or avoid talking about where I came from. I'm always afraid the past will find me again. Daniel reached over and held her hand. You don't have to face that alone anymore, he said quietly. You've got me now? Lena's eyes filled with tears. You don't understand. That man, he's dangerous. I didn't just leave him, I ran away. He's the kind of person who doesn't let things go easily. And if he ever finds out where I am, her voice broke. I don't know what he'll do. Daniel squeezed her hand tighter. You're safe now, he said. You have me. We'll figure it out together. She shook her head slowly. That's what scares me, Daniel. I don't want you to get involved in this. I couldn't live with myself if anything happened to you. He looked into her eyes. I don't care what it takes. I'm not letting you face this alone. She tried to smile, but her lips trembled. You don't even know how much that means to me, she whispered. They sat there for a while, just watching the city lights in silence. It felt like the air between them had changed, heavier but somehow more real. After a while, Daniel said softly, So that's why you were so scared. Why you kept pulling away, she nodded. Every time things started to feel right, I panicked. Because I kept thinking, what if it all disappears again? He leaned closer and said, Then let's make sure it doesn't. You're not alone anymore, Lena. You don't have to run. Her eyes glistened as she whispered, You really believe that? I do, he said, because I believe in you. For the first time in weeks, she smiled, an honest, fragile smile that reached her eyes. They stayed there until the sky turned darker, just talking. Lena shared more about her past, how she had moved from place to place, how she had changed her number, even her job, just to stay hidden. It was heartbreaking to hear how much fear she had lived with. When it grew late, Daniel drove her home. Before she stepped out of the car, she turned to him and said softly, I feel lighter now, like I finally let go of something I've been holding for too long. He smiled gently. That's what love's supposed to do. She reached over, touched his face, and whispered, Thank you for not walking away. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He lay awake thinking about everything she had told him. The pain she had carried, the fear that still haunted her, it all made sense now. And he made a silent promise to himself. No matter what, he would protect her. But the next morning, when he called her, there was no answer. He tried again in the afternoon, still nothing. His worry grew stronger with every passing hour. By evening, he drove to her apartment. Her car was there, but her lights were off. He knocked, then called her name, but there was no sound. He checked his phone again. No message, no missed calls. Just as he was about to leave, a neighbor came out of the building. "Are you looking for Lena?" she asked. "Yes," Daniel said quickly. "Do you know where she is?" The woman hesitated, then said, "2 men came earlier today. They were asking about her. I don't know who they were, but she looked scared when they showed up." Daniel's chest tightened. "Did they take her?" The woman shook her head. "No, but after they left, she packed a small bag and drove off." Daniel thanked her and rushed back to his car. His hands were shaking as he called her again. Still nothing. He tried texting her. "Where are you? Please just tell me you're safe." Hours passed with no reply. Late that night, he finally received a message. It was short and blurry, like it had been written in a rush. "I'm sorry. Don't look for me. It's better this way." His heart sank. He read the message over and over, hoping it meant something else. But deep down, he knew she had left to protect him. For the next few days, Daniel couldn't focus on anything. He barely ate, barely slept. Every sound made him check his phone, hoping for another message. But nothing came. Then on the 4th day, he found a small envelope slipped under his door. His name was written on it in Lena's handwriting. His hands trembled as he opened it. Inside was a letter. "Daniel, if you're reading this, it means I had to leave sooner than I thought. I didn't want it to end this way, but I couldn't drag you into the danger I've been running from. You deserve a life free from fear, not one spent looking over your shoulder because of me. Please don't think I didn't love you. I did, more than I ever thought I could. You reminded me what trust feels like, what peace feels like. And maybe someday, when things are safe, I'll find a way back. But for now, you have to let me go. Thank you for being my safe place, even if it was only for a little while. Lena." Daniel sat there for a long time, the letter trembling in his hands. It felt like all the air had left the room. He read her words again and again, each line sinking deeper into his chest. He wanted to chase her, to find her, to tell her that he didn't care about the danger. But something inside him knew she was right. If she left, it was because she truly believed it was the only way to keep him safe. Days turned into weeks. Life slowly began to move forward, but the ache never really left. Every time he saw someone with long, dark hair, his heart would jump for a second only to sink again. Sometimes, late at night, he'd drive up to that same viewpoint where she had told him everything. He'd sit there in silence, staring at the city lights, remembering her voice, her laughter, her smile. And even though she was gone, he never stopped believing that somewhere out there, she was thinking of him too. Because love like that doesn't just disappear. It lives quietly in the spaces between memories, waiting, hoping, and believing that one day somehow their paths might cross again.